The sky above Salu Kami burned orange with cannon fire. 3 Venator-class Star Destroyers held formation over the planet's equator, while Republic gunships carved through flat corridors toward the surface. In the lead ship's command center, Anakin Skywalker stood over a holographic tactical display, moving battalion markers with the practiced ease of a man who had spent 3 years learning war the hard way. "General Skywalker, the 501st is pinned on the southern ridge. Separatist armor has them boxed in." Captain Rex's voice crackled through the comms, steady but urgent. Anakin didn't hesitate. He pulled 2 divisions from a feint he'd staged on the eastern flank, a feint no one in the Council had authorized, and rerouted them through a canyon the enemy hadn't bothered to scout. Within 40 minutes, the Separatist armor was flanked, broken, and burning. It was the kind of decisive command that won campaigns. Across the Outer Rim sieges of 19 BBY, it was becoming routine. On the ground, clone troopers called him Master Skywalker without thinking twice. When Anakin spoke, battalions moved. Jedi Knights who outranked him on paper followed his battle plans without question. Even Commander Cody had remarked privately to Rex that Skywalker's tactical instincts rivaled the senior generals. And the Council noticed. Mace Windu, who had spent years keeping Anakin at arm's length, began assigning him independent theater commands, full operational authority over planetary campaigns. The Jedi Order needed Anakin Skywalker more than its traditions could comfortably admit. Obi-Wan saw it most clearly. Standing beside Anakin on the bridge after Salu Kami, he felt something unexpected. Recognition. Anakin wasn't becoming a great Jedi, he already was one. The only people who hadn't said it out loud were the 12 beings who sat in a circle on Coruscant. Thousands of light years from the front lines, the Jedi Council chamber on Coruscant felt like a different war entirely. 12 chairs, 12 voices, and a question none of them wanted to answer directly. "Skywalker's results speak for themselves," Ki Adimundi said. "He has commanded more successful campaigns in the last year than most of us combined. The troops trust him. The other knights trust him. At what point does withholding the rank become a liability?" Mace Windu leaned forward. "Results are not the only measure of a Jedi Master. Emotional discipline matters. Attachment matters. Skywalker's relationship with Senator Amidala." "Unconfirmed," Yoda interrupted gently. His eyes were half closed, but his voice carried the weight of 9 centuries. "Suspected? We do. Proven it? We have not. And punish what we cannot prove? We should not." The chamber fell silent. Yoda had never defended Anakin so directly before. "His growth since Ahsoka Tano's departure has been notable," Yoda continued. "Pain he carries, but channeling it he is. Into leadership, into teaching, into patience that once he did not possess." Windu was unmoved. "Patience in battle is not the same as patience in the soul. I've seen the darkness flicker. In all of us, darkness flickers," Yoda replied quietly. The debate ended without resolution, as it always did when Anakin's name came up. But the outcome was telling. They assigned him another independent command. They gave him authority over a joint task force with 2 Jedi Masters reporting to him. They treated him in every functional sense as a master. They just refused to say it. And that contradiction would define everything that came next. Enjoying our alternative Star Wars universe? Consider liking and hitting the hype button to show us your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more mind-bending tales from the Star Wars universe. Between campaigns, in the rare quiet hours aboard the Resolute, Anakin found himself doing something he never would have done 2 years ago. He was teaching. Not formally, not with the structured lesson plans of the Jedi Temple, but younger Jedi, Padawans and fresh knights assigned to the Outer Rim gravitated toward him. They came for tactical advice and stayed for something else. Honesty. "You're going to be afraid," Anakin told a young Togruta Padawan named Kaden before her first ground assault. "That's not the dark side talking. That's your body telling you the stakes are real. The dark side is what happens when you pretend the fear isn't there." It was the kind of thing no one had ever said to him. Not Obi-Wan, who taught through example and expected Anakin to decode the lesson. Not the Council, who treated emotion like a disease to be quarantined. Anakin had learned it from failure. He thought about Ahsoka constantly, not with the raw, bleeding grief of those first months after she walked away from the Order, but with something quieter, a reckoning. He had trained her well in combat and tactics, but he hadn't trained her for the moment when the Order would turn on her. He hadn't prepared her for betrayal, because he himself hadn't prepared for it. The Council had framed her, expelled her, handed her to a military tribunal, and when Barriss Offee's guilt was exposed, they had offered reinstatement as though trust, once shattered, could be glued back together with a title. Ahsoka had seen through it and walked away. Anakin had stayed. That choice haunted him. But Ahsoka's absence had done something the Council never could. It forced him to see the Order not as the family he wanted it to be, but as the flawed institution it actually was. And in that space, between loyalty and disillusionment, Anakin began to become the kind of master the Jedi Order claimed to produce, but so rarely did. Empathetic without being permissive. Honest without being cruel. Patient without being passive. He became what Ahsoka deserved. It was also during these quiet months that Captain Rex came to him with something stranger. Ever since the death of the clone trooper Fives on Coruscant, Fives, who had screamed about a conspiracy and a chip in his head before security gunned him down, Rex had been having headaches. He couldn't shake the feeling Fives had been telling the truth. Anakin listened. He didn't dismiss it. And quietly, between campaigns, he began reaching out to a small circle of clone medics and trusted commanders, asking questions about the standard biochip implanted in every clone at birth on Kamino. He didn't tell the Council. He learned by then what happened when the Council was asked to take Anakin Skywalker's instincts seriously. Palpatine watched all of this with great interest and growing concern. For years, the Sith Lord had cultivated Anakin's resentment like a gardener tending poison ivy. Every slight from the Council, every denied promotion, Palpatine had been there to water it, to shape it toward the dark. But the soil was changing. The Anakin who sat across from him now was not the angry young man who had slaughtered Tusken Raiders on Tatooine. This Anakin was quieter, more contained, and far more dangerous to Palpatine's plans. So, the Chancellor adapted. "I've heard remarkable things about your campaigns in the Outer Rim," Palpatine said, pouring Alderaanian wine with practiced ease. "The Senate is talking about you, Anakin, not just as a general, as a leader. Some are calling you the most important Jedi in a generation." "The Council doesn't seem to agree," Anakin said. But there was no bitterness in it, just fact. Palpatine leaned in. "Perhaps that's because the Council measures greatness by their own standards. Standards designed to protect their authority, not to recognize genuine ability." He paused, letting the words settle. "You already are what they refuse to acknowledge, my boy. A master, in every way that matters." It was a masterful pivot. Instead of stroking anger, Palpatine fed validation. Instead of positioning himself against the Jedi, he positioned himself as the one willing to say what everyone could see. More sophisticated than his previous manipulations. More dangerous because it contained a kernel of truth. Anakin felt the warmth in it, the recognition, but something had shifted in him that Palpatine couldn't quite see. Ahsoka's departure, the war, the quiet act of teaching younger Jedi. All of it had built a center of gravity that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. He thanked the Chancellor for the wine. He smiled at the compliment, and he left the office feeling something Palpatine had never intended. Cautious. The battle in the moons of Onderon was supposed to be a cleanup operation. It became a catastrophe, and then a legend. A hidden separatist fleet, remnants of Count Dooku's crumbling network, ambushed a Republic task force carrying 3 Jedi Masters. Agan Kolar, Saesee Tin, and a convoy of clone battalions. Gravity well projectors pulled the Republic ships out of hyperspace into a kill zone. Within 20 minutes, Kolar's flagship was crippled. Tin's cruiser was venting atmosphere, and clones were dying by the hundreds. Anakin was 2 systems away. He made the jump without Council authorization, arriving with the 501st and a plan formulated entirely in transit. He split his forces, sent Rex on a run toward the gravity wells while he personally led a starfighter squadron through the asteroid ring to hit the command ship from a blind angle. The wells went down. The fleet jumped to safety. Kolar and Tin survived. 4,000 clone troopers who would have died that day went home to fight again. When the battle reports reached Coruscant, the Council convened to discuss Anakin's actions. The praise was genuine. Even Windu admitted Skywalker's intervention had been decisive. Ki-Adi-Mundi openly called it the most impressive independent command of the war. And then, they moved on to the next agenda item. No promotion, no title, no formal recognition beyond the standard military commendation. The galaxy noticed. The Senate noticed. The HoloNet ran stories about the hero with no name. The Jedi who commanded like a master, but wore the rank of knight. Clone troopers across the Grand Army talked about it in mess halls. Other Jedi Knights talked about it in temple corridors. Everyone knew what Anakin Skywalker was. The Council simply wouldn't say it. It came 3 weeks later. Anakin stood in the center of the Council chamber, sunlight streaming through the tall windows behind him, and listened to Mace Windu deliver the news. The Chancellor has requested that you be appointed to this council as his personal representative. After deliberation, we have agreed. Anakin felt the weight of every eye in the room. 12 masters, 12 seats, and now, one of them was his. He waited. However, Windu continued, and there it was. The word Anakin had known was coming. We do not grant you the rank of master. In the original history, in the timeline that led to Mustafar and the suit and the 20 years of darkness, this was the moment Anakin's anger ignited. Resentment curdled into rage, and rage opened the door Palpatine had been prying at for years. But that was a different Anakin. This one had buried friends on Salukami, had taught frightened Padawans to breathe through their fear, had carried the memory of Ahsoka Tano like a scar that healed into something stronger. Anakin looked at Windu. He looked at Yoda. He looked at the empty chair they were offering him, a seat at the table with no voice, a gesture of inclusion designed to maintain control. And he said, quietly, "Then the title means less than the duty." The chamber went still. It wasn't anger. It wasn't defiance. It was something far more unsettling to the Council. It was clarity. Anakin Skywalker had looked at the thing he'd wanted most in the galaxy, the validation he chased since he was a 9-year-old slave on Tatooine, and recognized it for what it was, a leash disguised as a rope. He took the seat. He didn't argue. He didn't storm out. And Mace Windu, for the first time in years, felt something he couldn't quite name when he looked at Anakin Skywalker. It might have been respect. It might have been fear. The night before Obi-Wan left for Utapau to hunt General Grievous, he found Anakin on the temple's upper landing platform, looking out over the Coruscant skyline. They stood together in silence for a long time. Two men who had been master and apprentice, brothers and rivals, bounded by a war that had taken everything from both of them. "You handled the Council well," Obi-Wan said finally. "I didn't handle them," Anakin replied. "I just stopped letting them handle me." Obi-Wan considered this. He thought about Qui-Gon Jinn, the man who had found Anakin on Tatooine and believed this boy was the chosen one. Qui-Gon had always chafed against the Council, believing the living force spoke through individuals, not institutions. The Council had called him a maverick. Looking at Anakin now, steady, grounded, carrying the weight of a war without buckling, Obi-Wan realized something. "You've surpassed me," he said. A simple recognition of truth. Anakin looked at him, surprised. "In some ways," Anakin clarified with a small smile, "your lightsaber form is still sloppy." Anakin laughed. A real laugh. The kind that had become rare in the Clone Wars. "Qui-Gon would have been proud of you," Obi-Wan said. "He saw something in you the rest of us were too afraid to trust. I think you've become what he always believed you could be." Anakin's voice was quiet. "I just wish it hadn't cost so much to get here." They clasped forearms, a warrior's gesture, not a teacher's, and Obi-Wan left for Utapau, carrying a certainty he hadn't felt since the war began. Whatever happened next, Anakin Skywalker would not fail. Palpatine chose his moment carefully. With Obi-Wan dispatched to Utapau and the Council's attention fractured across a dozen fronts, the Chancellor sat across from Anakin in his private office and dropped the mask he'd worn for 13 years. He told the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise, the Sith Lord who could manipulate midichlorians to create life, to cheat death. Every word carried an implication. The dark side held answers the Jedi forbade. The power to save Padme was within reach. if Anakin was brave enough to take it. "I know the ways of the Force," Palpatine said, his eyes yellow for just a moment. "All of them." In the other timeline, this was where Anakin's desperation overwhelmed his judgment. But this Anakin had spent the last year confronting loss. He had lost Ahsoka and survived. He had watched friends die and carried their memory without drowning. He had learned that love did not require control. The visions of Padme's death still came at night, but fear was no longer the entirety of who he was. "You're the Sith Lord," Anakin said. Not a question. Palpatine smiled. "I am." Anakin's hand moved to his lightsaber, then stopped. If he struck here, alone, without witnesses, the Chancellor of the Republic killed by a Jedi in his own office, no trial, no evidence. That was exactly what Palpatine was counting on. "I'm reporting this to the Council," he said, "and I'm going to be there when they come for you." "You would deny yourself the power to save her." "I would deny you the chance to use her against me." He left the office. His hands were shaking, but his mind was clear. Mace Windu arrived at the Chancellor's office with Kit Fisto, Agen Kolar, and Saesee Tiin. The same strike team as in the original timeline, but there was one critical difference. Anakin Skywalker walked beside them. Windu had resisted. Every instinct told him Anakin was too close to Palpatine, too emotionally compromised. But Anakin had delivered the intelligence voluntarily and made a devastating argument. "If I'm not there, you don't know what I'll do. If I am there, you do." Anakin couldn't argue with the logic. They entered the office together. Palpatine was waiting. The first fight erupted without preamble. Sidious moved like nothing they had ever seen, a blur of crimson plasma and dark side fury. Agen Kolar fell first, caught by a thrust he never saw coming. Saesee Tiin lasted seconds longer. Kit Fisto held for nearly a full minute, his green blade a wall of light, before Sidious found an opening and struck him down. 3 Jedi Masters, dead in under 90 seconds. Windu and Anakin faced Sidious together. Windu's Vapad fed on Sidious's darkness, turning aggression against him. Anakin's Gem So drove forward with raw power, forcing Sidious to divide his attention. They fought through the office, shattering the panoramic windows, the Coruscant night wind howling around them. Sidious was losing. He stumbled. His lightsaber clattered away. He collapsed against the window frame, face twisted with rage and fear, and Mace Windu raised his blade for the killing blow. "He's too dangerous to be left alive!" Windu shouted, and there it was. The same moment, the same words, the same choice. Anakin stepped forward, but not to save Palpatine. He stepped between them. "He has to stand trial," Anakin said. "That's what separates us from them. If we execute him here, we become exactly what he says we are." Windu hesitated. Every muscle screamed to end it. The dark side radiated from Sidious like heat from a furnace, and the temptation was almost overwhelming. "Mace," Anakin said, "this is how we win. Not by killing him in the dark, by dragging him into the light." Windu lowered his blade, but kept it ignited, the purple light hovering inches from Sidious's throat. Anakin reached out with the Force and locked the Sith Lord in place. Every muscle held rigid. Sidious snarled, thrashing against the invisible grip, his yellow eyes burning with murderous calculation. He could still kill them. They knew it. He knew they knew it. For 9 long minutes, they held him there, Windu's blade at his throat, Anakin's will crushing his limbs, until the Coruscant Guard arrived with force-suppressing binders forged for exactly this contingency. The cuffs locked, the collar sealed, and Palpatine's connection to the Force went silent for the first time in his life. For the first time in 1,000 years, a Sith Lord was taken alive. Palpatine's capture did not prevent Order 66. It only disrupted it. The contingency was hardwired, buried deep in the clone troopers' inhibitor chips, designed to trigger on a specific coded transmission. Palpatine had built redundancy, automated systems, deadman switches embedded in Republic military infrastructure that activated the moment his arrest was confirmed by Senate security protocols. But the damage was not total. On Coruscant, Anakin had spent the last 6 months doing something the Council knew nothing about. The investigation that began with Rex's headaches had quietly expanded. A handful of clone medics, 24 commanders, a black channel network of officers Anakin trusted with his life. They hadn't extracted the chips. The surgery was delicate and there hadn't been time. But they had identified them, mapped them, and built protocols for the moments a chip might activate without explanation. When Order 66 fired across the galaxy, those forewarned units recognized the symptoms before they pulled the trigger. Rex felt the override slam into his mind on the bridge of the Resolute, and he fought it the way he'd been preparing to fight it for months. Long enough to block his blaster, long enough to slam the emergency stim Anakin had given him into his neck, the one designed to disrupt the chip's signal for the critical first minutes. It bought him just enough time. Across the sectors where Anakin's network existed, clone units faltered. Some Jedi survived because their commanders hesitated by half a second. Others survived because trusted clone officers physically restrained their own brothers. It wasn't clean. It wasn't universal. In most of the galaxy, the contingency worked exactly as Palpatine had designed. But on Utapau, Cody received the order, raised his blaster toward Obi-Wan Kenobi on the cliffside above, and the clone beside him, a sergeant who had served under Anakin at Selukami, knocked the rifle aside. On Kashyyyk, Yoda was already moving when the firing started. Across 24 worlds where Anakin's quiet network reached, the slaughter became a struggle instead of an execution. It didn't save everyone. Aayla Secura died on Felucia. Ki-Adi-Mundi fell on Megiddo. Jedi Masters whose commanders had no connection to Anakin's network were cut down in the first volley. Hundreds died. But the Order survived. Battered, scattered, hunted, but alive. The Senate convened. Palpatine's true identity was exposed. The manufactured war, the manipulated votes, the slow erosion of democracy dressed as security. Bail Organa led the proceedings. Padme Amidala stood beside him. Alive, furious, and magnificent, the Republic survived. Wounded, scarred, forever changed, but alive. Weeks later, what remained of the Jedi Council gathered in their damaged chamber. Yoda, Windu, Obi-Wan, a handful of survivors. They looked at the empty chairs and felt the weight of everyone they had lost, and they offered Anakin Skywalker the rank of Jedi Master. He stood in the center of the chamber, the same spot where he had once said, "Then the title means less than the duty." He looked at each of them in turn. Yoda, ancient and grieving. Windu, humbled in ways he was only beginning to understand. Obi-Wan, his brother, watching him with quiet pride. "I appreciate what you're offering," Anakin said, "but if I am one, I don't need you to save." He turned and walked out of the chamber, not in anger, not in defiance, in peace. On the temple's landing platform, Padme was waiting. She took his hand. Together, they looked out over a galaxy that was broken, bleeding, and uncertain, but free. And somewhere in the Force, Qui-Gon Jinn smiled. Because the Chosen One had not brought balance by destroying the darkness. He had brought it by refusing to let the darkness define him. If you enjoyed this journey into an alternative Star Wars universe where destiny takes unexpected turns and balance means something entirely different, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We explore the infinite possibilities hidden within the galaxy far, far away, asking the questions that reshape everything you thought you knew. The Force has many paths. Come discover them with us.